Hey guys, so we are going to learn today about volume of our rectangular prisms. Okay, you guys have found volume before with I think in 5th grade, you guys probably did this, but this time we are going to have a lot of fractions and decimals instead of all those nice whole numbers. So first, this solve and discuss. It says here's our rectangular prism, has the dimensions that are shown, find the volume. So you guys kind of think about, if I'm finding my volume, I have my 3 numbers. A lot of you, I hear this all the time when I'm asking for area, but this is actually our volume. Our volume is that length times width times height. So when I have 1.5 and another 1.5 and 2, I want to multiply them all together. Now, one thing that I will stress is that if I start with fractions, then my answer better have fractions in it. Okay, so if I have 1.5 times 1.5 times 2, you guys can use your calculators to help you with this. Remember, in those scientific calculators, we have that ABC button that you can type in there. So that would be like 1, ABC, 1, ABC, 2. You can type that into the calculator, and that's the same as saying 1 and 1/2. Okay, if I type that into my calculator, I get 4.5, and it's inches, but now we're talking about volume, and volume is 3. So 3, I'm going to have cubed as my my note here. So we know how to use this formula, length times width times height, to find our volume of our rectangular prism. So how do I use it to find the volume of this prism above? It's exactly the same. So whether those numbers were 2, 3, and 4, or if they were fractions like before, we still use the formula the same way. Okay? Alright, so let's look at another example. As always, guys, you need to remember to show your work. If you show your work, you show more of an understanding, so you need to write down volume is length times width times height. Do not take shortcuts. You take shortcuts, then you don't actually know what you're talking about. Okay, so you want to make sure that you're writing everything down. So my volume is equal, and I want to write in what my length is, what my width is, and what my height is. So I have 2.5 times my 2.5 times my 1.5. And again, I will let you use your calculators to multiply that all together. So multiply each one together to get our total of 9 3/8 inches cubed. Okay. At any time in this video, you need to pause it to make sure that you have time to type it into the calculator yourself or work through problems. Please pause and go at your own pace. You don't have to go as quickly as I move through some of these problems. Okay, here's a try it and a convince me. So at this time, definitely pause your video and work through this problem alone, and then I will go over the answers. Okay, hopefully you paused your video, so now I can go over the answers with you. I want to write down my formula like I told you to. So length times width times height, and I want to use my 3 digits here. So 2.5 times 1.5 times 1.5 to get 5 5/8 inches cubed. Alright, and then it's asking, suppose that the length of the rectangular prism in the try it was 3.5 instead of 2.5. So I'm just going to replace that. So length times width times height, 3.5 times 1.5 times 1.5. Okay, to get my final answer here as 7 7/8 inches cubed. Again, make sure that you got the same thing I did. Check your work. Make sure you're writing. There's not a lot to write down. It's not like surface area. There's not a whole bunch of things, but you need to make sure that you're writing your formula, you're writing your work, and then you're showing me your answer. Okay? You always need to have that on your paper. Okay, so again, using that formula still to figure out what our volume is going to be for a rectangular prism. So this time we have a fish tank. Volume is length times width times height. And I'm going to use length, width, height. So I have 3 1/3 times 1 times 1 1/3. Okay, so if you don't have a scientific calculator, or if you don't want to put 3 things with your ABC button, you can always turn these into improper fractions. So I have 3 times 3 plus 1, so I get 10 1/3 times 1, and then I have 3 times 1 plus 1, 4/3, and you can multiply that straight into your calculator as well. And in the end, we are going to get 4 4/9, and it's feet, so I have feet cubed. So that's how much the volume is of our fish tank. Now, when we were talking about surface area before, we came across our cubes. Cubes have the same shape on all 6 sides. Okay, so for my volume of a cube, I actually can do volume and then my side cubed. Okay, so use like whatever unit they've provided for you, and I multiply it 3 times. If you remember, we've talked about it briefly, that we have the little caret key is for our exponents. So you can type in that number that you have and then put the caret key and a 3 after it. Sometimes in calculators it might be like a y to the x or an x to the y. Ask questions if you're not sure how to use that key. If you are second guessing how to use that key, we can always multiply that same number by itself 3 times and still get the same answer. Okay, this is kind of like a shortcut. We don't have to use it. Okay, so but if I multiply 2.5 times 2.5 times 2.5, that's going to get me 15 5/8 inches cubed. And that is going to be, again, my volume of my little cube. All right, we have another try it here. Go ahead, take some time and pause the video. Try it on your own, and then check your work with me in just a moment. Alright, so here's my work and my answers here, so please check your work with mine. Make sure that you have the same thing, and again, make sure that you are writing down all of your work, not skipping the work part of this lesson. So write it all down. Do not just put an answer down. That is not going to help you later on. Alright. Lastly, guys, we have that do you understand section. So again, pause the video, try to answer each of the questions that you have here, and then check with me in just a moment. So please pause the video. Okay, so hopefully you paused the video here for your do you understand question. So the first one, you could have written down something along the lines as that we do it the same way we find the volume with whole numbers. So V is equal to length times width times height. Number 2 was a little bit of a challenge, but if I was given the volume, you would want to divide the product of the width and the height by the volume to get the length. So if I had volume, I would probably do something where I would have volume divided by my width and my height, and that would give me my length. And then the last one, if I have a cube and the side lengths are 2.3, again, I could use my third power in my calculator, or it's just 2.3 times 2.3 times 2.3 to get my answer here, and it's meters cubed. Okay. Work on your homework, guys. If you have any questions, like always, rewatch the video or raise your hand and ask some questions.